Good morning, YouTubers. This is Jason Dean. Hope everyone's doing good. I really appreciate the support and people checking out the videos. It's been great because a lot of the videos that I've been posting, I've been getting a little bit more each week, and each week things have been getting a little bit more. Each video has been getting more views and people checking out the videos and commenting. So yeah, I'm a big fan of open dialogue about these movies too. So feel free to chime in more if you want, and we can discuss. If you have an interest in some of these strange and unusual films, we can talk about them. Um, I love corresponding about some of these films with people who find them really interesting, and because they're a lot of fun for me. So and that's part of the reason too why I mentioned I want to move into focusing more on doing interviews for this channel because it's a whole lot of fun, and it's really, you know, really always an interesting thing to kind of gain a different perspective, when you have another person who has a real diverse background and comes with something to the table that is, you know, um, something you might not be familiar with, or they might have a different perspective. That's one of the things I love about that, and I, like I said, I always feel like the consummate student. So I'm always picking people's brains. If I meet somebody, that happens pretty naturally for me in a lot of ways. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, I met this guy who, well, actually, this guy, Kevin, that I used to know from, he used to run this really awesome art gallery in Belfast called Aarhus. And Aarhus was an amazing space in Belfast quite a few years ago now. It's been closed for a while, but it was an art gallery in Belfast, and it was like run like on a cooperative level. There was, like, I think, five or six different owners, and each of the people that each of the parties, they were all artists in various mediums: painting, sculpturing, and photography. Mark Kelly was another guy who was a person who was in charge of the gallery, and he ran it. I knew him probably the most because he also was way into music and stuff, and he was like kind of the contact person that I had. I used to do a lot of events there. Well, not a lot. Well, I should say a handful of events at Aarhus, and it was really great. It was an amazing place. They were always willing to take chances. I did a few things there. I remember I did my great friend Tom Luther, who I did a show with earlier this summer. He We did a really awesome show in July with both of our bands, with Quantum and Sphere Music. We did an awesome show last year or actually this year, at the Poor Farm. And I have a long history with Tom Luther. He's an amazing piano player and musician, and we used to play together in various different combinations. They were all like original projects that he had put together, and they were mostly like jazz based projects. But he was a pretty serious composer. He wrote a lot of tunes. They were very complicated, lots of odd time signatures, and it was one of the first times he had a lot of different people kind of play in the band throughout the years in his two different projects that he had. He had one that was, I can't remember the name of the group. The Tom Luther Quintet was one, and then he had another group that was also a jazz group, but they also did arrangements of some tunes that I guess you can almost kind of consider to be show tunes, but it was very jazz based. And the Tom Luther Quintet was more of a straight ahead, real modern jazz kind of vibe. But for both of those bands, especially for the quintet, or the quartet, he had written all of these original tunes, and a lot of the tunes were very complicated, and it was a really great experience for me, and it was a real it always gave me a feeling of like trial by fire to a degree, because there was a lot of odd meters in a lot of the music. It had a fusion vibe to it, so a lot of the tunes were rhythmically challenging. So I had to put a lot of time into trying to get that stuff together. But it was a great experience, and it was one of the first times I got to kind of venture into that kind of project, and it was all original stuff. But Tom is, one of the most creative people I know, and he's done all kinds of projects. Lately, the last few years, he's done more original based, electronic based, all original electronic based projects. And when we did a show together, it was like after the jazz groups, I think. Well, it was actually during all during the same time, because it was hard to keep track. He had so many different groups going on at the same time. But at this time, he had this band called Algorithms, which was very electronic, very inspired by like Brian Eno, uh, like early Brian Eno stuff, which I'm a huge fan of. And we did a show together at Aarhus with Quantum, and that was in the early stages, or early time frame of when we were kind of becoming a band and starting to play gigs a lot, and it was super fun. And then I had played at Aarhus another time years before that with this band called Tit City, which was a great friend with my great friend Charlie Hendrick, and we were all electronic based. Um, you know, uh, that was the first band I ever played in that was a full on electronic kind of experience, and that was all original. And we played at Aarhus quite a years before the Quantum show. And then we also, when I did my film, Rapture, my short film, we actually had the showing of the film there, and that was a pretty fun experience. And then also, even before that, it's hard to believe it was that long ago, but even before that, the band I've talked a lot about, that I bring it up a lot because it's like a continuation in a lot of ways with what I do with Quantum. But the band I played with back then, years ago, was Full Contact Kitty, and we had played a show there also, and it was a great time because they were doing music, they were having music that was kind of on the fringe side of things, and it was, they had a really good run, and then finally, eventually, people just weren't really coming out to it anymore, and it was kind of things were getting kind of dismal there, and they eventually had to close. So, but anyway, there was like I said, there was like 6 or 7 different owners. It was a cooperatively run art gallery, and it was uh, it was during the time when, like, I guess like Instagram had first come out, and in the beginning of the show, I mentioned talking to this one guy, Kevin, who used to be one of the owners, and he was also like a really talented photographer. And I remember talking to him, like I had seen some stuff about Instagram peripherally, like on the side, and I got the impression that it was all like just about photography and basically people taking photos and selfies and whatnot. And so I remember like asking him, because I knew a lot of friends and people at the time were starting to jump on the Instagram thing, and people were using it for photos. And but Kevin was a really, like, you know pretty serious photographer. He did a lot of like kind of modern, very kind of experimental kind of photography and photos. And I remember him saying that like it was a real, viable thing. And this was, quite a few years ago. And he said, yeah, it's going to really grow to be this thing of where it's going to, eventually kind of get away from just being photography, and people will start using it for, for, marketing their businesses, and kind of this new and almost easier way of extending your promotion for your events that you're trying to, whether it's your business or if you're an artist and you're trying to host these events around your work, whether it's art openings or shows or concerts. He's like, hey, Instagram is going to be that next thing that's going to help people to, uh, you know, c- communicate those ideas more. And it will also be a thing of where it won't be so much as a social media kind of thing on the level where Facebook is that still, but where it's not, people won't use it as like a personal diary so much, and it won't be a thing of where people will get into arguments online and all these kinds of things about various things, religion, politics, what have you. He said it will be more eventually about the content of what that person is kind of selling or is promoting, whether they're a painter, photographer, dancer, musician, filmmaker, and people who have eclectic hobbies, promoting their works. So it was kind of interesting, and I remember talking to him, and I thought by talking to him would be a good perspective rather than somebody who, your average person who just has Instagram and they're using it for just their personal photos. But here was somebody who actually was a really skilled artist. So that's and so it gave me a whole different perspective of what Instagram could be, and a lot of those things he talked about ended up kind of becoming true because that's what Instagram kind of eventually evolved to. And so I eventually, just this past year, I put up an Instagram page for Film Fanatic. And I noticed, I was kind of late to the game with it, and I was kind of, part of me was kind of reluctant to do it because I felt, well, it's just a thing that people just post for, their own personal photos. It's not really anything other than that. And I'm not really into the whole selfie thing or posting pictures of everywhere that I go on my daily life. But I found it can be much more than that, and it's got it's got some really good attributes around it, and so I started thinking of the idea I should really put together an Instagram page. So I did just this past year for Film Fanatic, and it's been great. It's really helped the page. It's really helped the overall thing, and I've been acquiring people following it and checking out the post, and also it's helped kind of build up the whole kind of thing of what I've been trying to do with this whole thing with the movies I love. So it's been cool. So that's one of the reasons I want to, like, moving forward, I want to like focus more on trying to do interviews because you just gain you gain a different perspective, and it's always interesting, and it's always cool to, like, you find somebody really interesting, or that somebody is doing something that you find is like really cool. I always try to, like, kind of pick their brain a little bit and try to, like, get that perspective going. That's one of the reasons too, like with musicians, if I meet musicians that I really like, or that really draw my attention, that something about their playing really draws my attention, I will try to reach out to them and seek out, and maybe get set up a thing where we can play together or we can hang out and just try to really exchange some ideas. And I feel like for me that's one thing I try to do a lot, and it's also I look at it as this continuation of trying to further educate yourself and gain new knowledge and a perspective on things you might not have thought about before. So again, it's the same thing as to why I'm really attracted to doing these interviews. And so stay tuned for more of those. That will be a really cool experience to dive into and to make it more of a regular thing. That's one thing. I've only done it a couple times, and I tried setting up. I had a couple other interviews with other people, and unfortunately, mostly because of technology and my issues around it, that those things didn't happen. Those I had two interviews scheduled, and things kind of fell apart. But I have a little bit of an easier setup that I feel like I can understand. So I'd like to make it, much more of a regular thing of where I can maybe, line up guests on a fairly regular basis or things in the future. So, or, over the next this coming year. So stay tuned for that. So this brings me to this amazing film called The Lamp, and this was a movie I definitely had never seen before. I and it's funny because this is a film I've actually heard a lot about. There's a guy on YouTube, Adam Caesar, who is a really great YouTuber, and he basically reviews, all of these great exploitation movies, and primarily like horror exploitation, kind of like the things that are really up my alley, and mostly these are mostly the films that I tend to focus on. But he had done a review on this, I think it was a couple of years ago, and it always looked really interesting, and it sounded wild, and it was totally something I'd never seen it. And so I had come across it a few times when I was in the video shops going to Bull Moose, and I got preoccupied looking for other things, and I would always get other things, but I kept passing this up. And then finally, one of the last times I was in Bull Moose, I was like, you know what? I need to just buy this. And it was there again, so I was super excited. So I bought The Lamp, and super, super happy with this purchase. It came out in 1987. The original title for this film, when it was released in America, was called The Outing. And then in Europe, it was changed to, it was under the title of The Lamp. And this movie came out in 1987. It was directed by Thomas Daly, and it was distributed by Movie Store Entertainment. And it's basically a movie about a genie, but the genie is a demon, essentially. So it plays with the whole idea, because typically the whole story of how, like, I guess you could say, like, the whole typical folklore tale of genies is that you have the genie bottle, and the person who is the owner, they basically rub it, and the genie comes out and wishes, and you can, any wishes that you have, any wishes that you wish would come true, this genie will grant you those wishes. And usually it's like in the light of where it's like a force of good. But in this movie, he's actually a full-on kind of a demon. So they basically, the people who find this lamp unleash this evil force, and it's fabulous. It came out in 1987, like I said. I got this Blu-ray, and the transfer of this film is just amazing. The artwork is just so awesome. I love the artwork. Very, very cool. Classic 80s exploitation. And it's funny with the original title, which was The Outing. The other really cool thing is there's like a really great special features section on this package, and they talk about some interesting things. Like it was right after well, it was about 6 or 7 years after Halloween had come out, the first one, John Carpenter. And so they were able to get this movie financed by a lot of the same people who helped finance Halloween. So it ended up having, because of that, and the lamp got this massive distribution thing. So it actually made quite a bit of money when it was in circulation. It was in circulation at the time, like I think 800 theaters. And it actually made quite a bit of money. But the other dilemma that they were in was because it was such a low budget film. They, for the distribution, the way those things work, they didn't really have a lot of creative control over the final product. So the name was changed because of marketing, for marketing reasons. So they had a lot of, they had issues with that, and then also some of the issues around like the final cut of the film. It wasn't really what they expected and really what they wanted, and it was due because the film was so low budget. So artistically, they had, they were trying to sell this thing and try to get an audience, but they were so, um, it was such a everything was done on such a shoestring budget that they didn't really have that, um, that control. And but it's great, and the interviews on here are really interesting because they had interviews with like the producer, then the writer of the film, and some of the actors and actresses in the film, and they were just saying how, during the interview, that they were just, just completely kind of blown away that they, were being asked to do this newer edition and being interviewed for this film that was, after it made some money, it went into complete obscurity, and they thought, okay, this will never see the light of day. But due to the, kind of this whole explosion of all of these great, 70s and 80s exploitation movies, there was an audience, and there became a bigger audience for this film. So they re-released it on this Blu-ray, and it's a really amazing, it's a beautiful package. Super 80s, it's super cheesy. There's the creature design is pretty amazing for the genie, and also the music is great. Some of the kills are pretty fantastic. It's super silly, super campy, but a whole lot of fun. And I like it. It definitely has like an original premise and an original kind of look and feel, and it's super entertaining. It's definitely one that I really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to watching again. This was definitely one I had never seen before. So, yeah, 1987, uh, fabulous movie, and a lot of the people that made this film, they didn't really stick with filmmaking, or even stay in the film industry necessarily, or even stick with horror. This was like a thing that they just did. They just they It was a venture that they an adventure that they all decided to go on. But lo and behold, 30, 40 years later, there's an audience, and it's like a resurgence, a renaissance for these films, and myself included is part. I'm definitely part of that. So yeah, The Lamp, 1987. Get a chance, check this bad boy out. It's pretty spectacular. A great addition to my collection of all these great 80s exploitation movies. So thank you again. This is Jason Dean, and we'll see you next time.